All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us this fine Thursday morning. I kept thinking it was Friday all morning. I was getting on my son for not having his work done. And I was like, because it's due tomorrow. So we're good. Anywho, we're talking this morning about equity and after-school STEM strategies and resources, and we're welcoming today the National Girls Collaborative and Million Girls Moonshot. We're so excited that they came to share with us today. This is a huge topic for us in the upcoming year or two here, probably well into the future. We want to welcome you guys. I have a few housekeeping notes and then we'll get started. There we go. This webinar is recorded and will be available to watch on the Idaho Out of School Network website. With that being said, if you don't want your face or your voice to be recorded, now's the time to mute your camera and your mic. However, you are welcome to stay on and you're welcome to chat with us, and we'll probably have questions for you to unmute as well. If you're having trouble with your audio, you're more than welcome to call in on your phone instead. Please use that option if you need to. You're welcome to ask questions at any time, but we also utilize the chat box and I will help monitor that. And there's several people on the call that will also help monitor that. So feel free to use the chat box as much as you would like. We are using Zoom today. If this webinar is hacked or any inappropriate language or images appear, we'll do everything in our power to shut it down, and we'll cancel if necessary. Fingers crossed, it has never happened in over a year of being exclusively online with Zoom, so I feel good that no one's going to want to hack our STEM call, but just in case, we throw that out there. And just a quick reminder, we have a couple more trainings coming up here. One in April is the last of our spring training series, and we have Reaching More Youth Through Authentic Community Partnerships. Alan Taggart will be back for his second part of his series from 4-H in the U of I. So please sign up for that. And then just some things to keep, speaking of equity, keep on your mind coming forward in the future here. August 26th, we'll start our 10-part equity and inclusion series with the Leading Equity Center. It's going to be fantastic. Registration will be coming out soon, so please, please, please keep an eye out for that coming up in the future. And then, of course, we also have September 9th and 10th is our ION Power Up Summit. This year's theme is building up, and it's going to be great. And registration will be coming out for that soon as well. Everything will be Idaho Stars approved. Everything will be available for scholarship. So please, please keep that on your radar and keep a lookout for it. And with that, I am going to get out of mine. I'm going to stop sharing. And I am going to welcome Karen and Brenda, and is it Kata or Kata? Kata? I want to say it right. Kata. And they will start their presentation. Welcome, guys. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. We're really pleased to be here. You know, we've been presenting at lots of the After School Network conferences, and while we're really glad that we can meet you all and share with you over Zoom, it is, you know, I would like to be in Idaho today. So I hope you're having a good day. And again, I'm Karen Peterson. I'm the CEO of the National Girls Collaborative Project. We are working with STEM Next and Million Girl Moonshot, supporting the creation and implementation of the equity and inclusion framework. And if you don't know about NGCP, we are a large sort of umbrella network bringing together organizations throughout the United States that are committed to informing and encouraging girls to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And I'd also like to introduce my colleagues, Brenda Bridge, maybe you could wave, and Kata Lucas, who will be presenting along with me today. We'd also like to know sort of who's on the call, so perhaps you could introduce yourself in the chat. That would be great. And in just a minute, I'm going to have sort of an icebreaker activity, so prepare yourself for that icebreaker that will happen in just a minute. Let me go to the next slide. So this is our agenda for the webinar today. We're going to talk a little bit about why girls in STEM, some of the strategies for engaging girls in STEM. We'll have a small group discussion, and then we'll introduce you to this equity and inclusion framework that we've created, that we've been using over the last year or so. for the Million Girl Moonshot. And we'll have lots of time throughout this to answer questions. We'll also provide some resources as well. And I just want to say, you'll hear us repeat this during the presentation, but we know that all the strategies that engage girls in STEM work for boys too. So at any point, we could talk about facilitation or teaching strategies. And as we talk about these strategies are especially good for girls, they're very helpful for boys as well. All right. So this is our icebreaker activity. This is the first time I've done this specific icebreaker. What I want you to do is look around where you are and see if you can find something, and you might have to get up and move, which is fine, that is STEM related. Anything near you that is STEM related. And I put that black box on the screen because I don't know. And you define STEM. And then we'd like to take a few minutes. And if you're willing, we'd love to hear your voice. If you want to say, this is what I chose. And this is connected to STEM because, or you can write in the chat. So I'm going to pause for a minute because I know that you might need to grab something. And then when you have something and you're ready, go ahead and either write in the chat or unmute yourself and go for it. Because we'd love to hear what you've chosen.
I'll go real quick.
Good, go for it.
Well, I was like, obviously I have a whole bunch of computer stuff and whatnot around me, but that's easy. I was like, I want to pick that. I keep a dinosaur. I don't know if you guys can see him on my desk.
See that.
And although he's not a quality STEM model, probably not super accurate, however, he joins me in a lot of meetings, or he used to. Anyway, so he's my fun little science buddy.
And why is that STEM for you, Diana?
I think most sciences, and a lot of times we forget non-IT or computer sciences are still STEM, right? Like you can still include natural sciences, biology, right? Those are all science related, especially in the state of Idaho. We have a lot of really cool outdoor learning opportunities that are still all really cool STEM related, and it doesn't have to be a computer or technology, which is where we automatically go a lot of times. Actually, we have a lot of technology that goes into archaeology, waterways, mountain geography, right? Those all have a lot of tech around them as well. So I like to remind myself that it doesn't have to be strictly computer IT.
Very cool, thank you. Would someone else like to share their STEM thing?
Mine is pretty related to what Deanna was just talking about, that I work in outdoor education, and a lot of times we're kind of on the other side of STEM where we don't use a ton of technology, and we don't use, we do use engineering, but maybe not in the traditional sense. So I grabbed a book that's called Teaching Science in an Outdoor Environment. And so I think that we try to find kind of non-traditional definitions of STEM and how we can relate that in an outdoor setting.
That's fabulous. Thank you. Would anyone else like to share?
I'll go next because, hi, Alex. I know you. I went to your wedding. Nice to see you again. And mine is related. This is a muskrat skull I found while I was hiking. You see it? See it?
Wow.
The teeth there. Yeah. And that relates to STEM in that it is one of the I would call it biological sciences, but you could also have a taxonomy discussion, go a lot of different ways. So
that's fat. And you just found that, like laying on the ground when you were walking?
Yeah, all kinds of bumps if y'all want to see some more.
Whoa. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'm Wendy. Hi, everybody. And just sitting behind me within my Zoom reach is my son's a car like from the soapbox derby races, and he won with this car because of the extremely important weight to friction ratios.
Whoa, wow. Look at all these things connected to STEM that you were just within reach. Anybody else would like to share?
I just picked up a plant that was on my desk, and plant pathology is one of my favorite science areas of study.
Great, thank you so much. All right, well, that was a kind of a fun icebreaker. It was great to learn about all of you and to see what is STEM to you. So thanks so much. And I think now I am turning it over to Kata, and she's going to take it from here. Go for it, Kata.
Great, thanks so much, Karen. Can everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. First, we're just going to provide a little bit of an overview as to kind of why should we care about equity and STEM. And so first, youth really don't display a significant difference in their abilities in math and science. The differences really exist in the context of access, as well as interest, confidence, sense of belonging, and their perceptions of future success in STEM. And this is particularly notable and relevant for women of color as they continue to be extremely underrepresented in STEM in both the college and the workforce level. And this is just like a general summary of why STEM is an equity issue. May I have the next slide, please, Karen? Perfect. So the stats on this page really illuminate, I guess, the extent to which STEM is both an equity. And so women make up about 57% of the bachelor's degrees in all fields, and they also make up about 50% of the bachelor's degrees in STEM broadly. However, women are vastly underrepresented in the fields of physics, computer science, and engineering in particular, making up only 19% of the physics degrees and computer science degrees, and only 21% of the engineering degrees. So while women of color earn 34% of the bachelor's degrees, they actually only earn 14% of the bachelor degrees in STEM fields. Next slide, please. So moving on to the STEM workforce, women make up about 52% of the college educated workforce. And so what's even more telling about this is that women are actually concentrated in different occupations than men, with relatively high shares of women in the social science, about like 60%, and in the life sciences, about 48%, with relatively low shares in computer science and mathematical sciences. Women make up about 26%, and engineering, women make up only 15%. Again, kind of related to these discrepancies at the higher education level, women of color, notably Latina, Black, and Indigenous women represent less than 10% of the women in all STEM jobs. And this encompasses across the STEM fields. And so I think what these slides do is they really bring to light the extent of women's lack of representation in STEM fields, especially for women of color, really underscoring that not only the gender inequities in STEM education and the workforce, but also how these inequities are intersectional to other social constructions such as race and ethnicity. Next slide. And I'm actually going to pass it to Brenda now.
Thank you, Kata. In addition to what Kata just went over, we wanted to also bring up this information because in addition to gender, there are other factors that impact youth STEM trajectories. And I think those of you on this webinar might be able to relate to this. And I'd like you to think about your own context and the youth you serve. But we know, as Kata already mentioned, race and ethnicity are important factors, but there are others, including access to high quality STEM opportunities, and that access can be limited based on a number of factors. You'll see this diagram of a STEM ecosystem on this slide, which talks about, it shows a variety of areas and places and potential opportunities for youth to interact with STEM. And some kids have much more access to those types of opportunities and places than others. And this might be based on geography. It could be just based on your family background and interests, as well as income level. So we have socioeconomic status listed, and we also have STEM capital. And I'm guessing most of you on this webinar are familiar with this term, but if not, we think of STEM capital as kind of, it's similar to the idea of social capital. So it's kind of the familiarity that you have with STEM and how much it is around you, how much interaction you have with it and exposure you have to it. So it could be knowing people in your life who are STEM professionals. It could be that your family goes to the nature center or the science museum often, or that they don't. And so all of those factors really play into the challenges, and then also the strategies that we'll talk about today really help address these different areas. So I'm just interested, and again, you can unmute yourselves or you can write in the chat. As you think about your context and you think about the youth you serve, what do you think are some of the barriers for them and their engagement in STEM, of all of the things we've talked about, or even something additional that we haven't mentioned?
Oh, I could go first. We're part of Boise Parks and Recreation, and I know that in different communities around Boise, recreation is not a priority, and maybe they're unaware of the benefits that doing outdoor education or STEM education could have for their children. And so I think it's a combination of a lot of these factors, but I think that the access to opportunities is definitely one of them.
Great, thank you, Alex. I appreciate you sharing. And that's interesting, thinking about Boise. That's a little bit surprising to me from what I know of Boise. So that's an interesting point. Someone else like to share before we move on?
We've heard from parents of non-white ethnicities that although they want their kids to look at STEM or be in STEM, the parents don't understand those topics and feel like they can't help or be of service to their kids, and that's stressful for them. So they may not be choosing to put kids in STEM programs that they don't understand.
We hear that a lot. That is a very common, potential barrier for families. And I don't know if it was Anna, or I think Wendy's also listed as Anna for the purposes of the chat for some reason, said socioeconomic rural conditions, which is, it's very, we hear that a lot as well. And so sometimes that's even, it exacerbates the gender piece, but sometimes it's even, it overtakes the gender piece. So really the income and then the geography can be really important.
We also have a lot of programs. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Wendy, go ahead.
I was just going to say that was me.
Okay.
And that I think that we're really trying to focus on rural communities where the opportunities are even more limited, and the idea that someone could go into those fields without advanced degrees is prohibitive, at least in people's thinking.
Yeah, excellent point. Thank you. And so now we're going to jump into some strategies and discussing some strategies for addressing these barriers, hopefully, and increasing equity. So I'm going to turn it back to Karen for a minute.
Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, I just want to talk about this slide for a minute. This is something called Draw a Scientist. it's actually kind of a fun activity. I used to do a lot of work in other countries. And I will say that when I did this activity, when I just said to young people, draw a picture of a scientist, like what comes into mind, I'd give them a blank piece of paper, they would draw a scientist. And overwhelmingly, I would see a picture like a man with sort of crazy hair in a white coat, right? And even though we know that things are getting better, if you do that activity, you might see a few non-crazy haired men in white coats. We know that there's still a lot of stereotype thinking around who can be a scientist. And one of my favorite parts about sort of talking about Draw a Scientist is you can see this a very cool brunette with blue glasses and a blue top. And this drawing came out of a research study that was done. And if any of you are interested, I can send the link along. But they had young people come to a lab. And before they went in and met all the scientists and the role models, they had them draw scientists. And so I think it's the one with the red hair. That's what a young girl drew. Then she went in and she met all these amazing female scientists who talked about their lives and talked about their work. And her post drawing was this very cool woman in a blue top. And the quote is something like, young girl says, "I didn't know that a scientist could like wear cool glasses and play racquetball or tennis and have an exotic pet or something like that." So the thing I like about that study is, that was just one day, right? Here's a young girl that had an image of a scientist in her mind. And by the end of the day, she realized that there are many different types of people that could be a scientist as well. So it's a fun activity. And I know that sometimes when I'm working with young people, if I have some extra time, I just have them draw a scientist and then we all talk about what they drew and why. And that can be just sort of a quick activity to get that conversation going about, what is a scientist? What do you think a scientist might look like? And have an opportunity to talk about different sorts of people that could be scientists. All right, I think I'm turning it back to Brenda. I got to do my draw scientist slide.
Great. Thank you, Karen. So one of our strategies we're going to talk about is identify and address STEM stereotypes. So if you look at these images, I'd like you to think about what comes to mind and what stereotypes you think they either confirm or do not confirm about STEM. And feel free to type in the chat if you have some thoughts that you'd like to share about what you see. And I'm just briefly going to go over them. So we know research has shown that it's important to show images of diverse STEM professionals and diverse STEM experiences. So you'll see we have a poster, a really nice artistic poster of Mae Jemison, who's a woman astronaut. And then we also have a picture of Albert Einstein, who I know kind of gets a bad rap when we talk about famous scientists, but it used to be really the go-to image, right? That people would use. And so you can just imagine the difference if you're if you don't identify with someone like Albert Einstein, then seeing images of diverse STEM professionals around the space or being exposed to them could be really powerful. We also have a couple pictures of girls. These are pictures from Sci Girls, if you're familiar with the television show, doing collaborative science projects together. So the girls on the bottom left are doing a forensic science project, and the girls on the bottom right are doing a frog habitat study. And something else that research shows us is that it's good for girls and other youth who aren't as who don't identify with STEM as much. All of the factors we talked about earlier. It's helpful if they can see that STEM can be done with others and collaboratively. Often the stereotype is that STEM is done in isolation, right? You do it alone. And so that's really helpful. Also showing that STEM can be fun, right? You can see these girls they look pretty happy. The top image of the women in the lab also is to show, it shows that they can do it together, but also research has shown that girls are turned off by images that are just materials and tools related to STEM versus people doing STEM. So you'll see the beakers, and we often use images, I think, of science tools or materials like beakers or computers. And really the research shows that girls are much more engaged if you can show people actually doing STEM, engaging in STEM. So those are some examples of a variety of ways you could present STEM. And so really we want to support girls in pushing against existing STEM stereotypes. And as Karen mentioned, we see progress, but these STEM stereotypes are pretty persistent in terms of, associating STEM with white, somebody who's white, often male, and often somebody who's brilliant, right? Or just naturally so good at math and science. It's also considered very much a privileged field in a lot of ways. And so some people don't see that it's a possibility for them. And also the doing STEM in isolation is another very persistent stereotype. And so we want to counter these stereotypes implicitly and explicitly. So using images like we just talked about in your learning environment is a implicit way. And also we're learning more and more about how important it is to actually talk with youth about the STEM stereotypes that exist so they can start identifying them and breaking them down on their own. And this really helps girls and other youth to identify with STEM and STEM fields, and helps us to start decreasing those barriers that are related to these stereotypes that we see. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Karen. She posted the SciGirls resources. If you're not familiar with them, they're fantastic. So our next strategy is about making STEM personally and culturally relevant. So we know that it's important for girls and other youth who feel disconnected to STEM to really be able to see its value in their daily lives and to appreciate that it relates to them and their families and their communities. So we really want to design activities and opportunities that draw on girls' interests, their background knowledge, their background, everything that they're bringing with them and their lived experiences, and to value their contributions and unique cultural strengths. And so really providing opportunities for the youth to make as many choices as possible in terms of what you're studying, how you're studying it, the activities you're going to engage in. I want to go back to the icebreaker that Karen did, because that's a great example of a way to kind of start helping to make things personally relevant for kids, is that you start learning bits about people's interests and backgrounds by doing activities like that. So that was a great example. And this really helps to increase girls' interest and helps them to develop a STEM identity, really seeing that it could be, STEM could be for them. It's something that could be relevant to their lives. And so now I just want to show a quick clip, a video clip. This is from a SciGirls episode. And I think it's a good example of how a group of girls is making a science activity based on their, making it relevant to their lives. So Karen, if you could show that, it's only about a minute and a half, I think. And think about the relevancy piece. Are you playing it, Karen?
I no longer have a screen share. I don't know if anyone else is not. Yeah, we don't, oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
Begin. Additional funding
Karen,
is provided.
Oh. You want to go to the
Sorry about that.
That's okay. We can go on if it's not queued up.
No, it's fine. I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to start again.
Just the clip. The identify the problem clip. Not the whole episode.
Okay, here we go. Just a minute.
And this is just one of many great videos and clips on the SciGirls site. If you're interested in looking at more, using them in your work. I can just go on, Karen, it's fine. We can go back to it if we.
No, I can do it. I just had a weird little flip, so I'm going to do it. Just a sec.
I think you need to share your screen again.
Does this have it? Come on, nope.
Jake, what are you doing?
I don't
Mighty
think this is.
golden ticket.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah,
with
why
all
don't
those
you just
Throwing them away.
You can't do
we'll
that.
just move on, Karen. There's a clip, I'll just briefly describe it, but it's a group of girls at their school who are finding that there's a lot of trash being thrown away that could be recyclable or could be compostable. And so the girls do this big project where they go through it and they figure out, sorry? Oh, and they
I'll put the link in the chat. I'm
okay.
sorry, I had a,
but it's just a good example of looking at their environments. You know, they identify a problem that they want to tackle and they tackle it. So it's just an example, but it's a great, there are a lot of great videos on that site too, if you want to use them in your work. You want to put the slideshow back up, Karen? Please. And I'm actually turning it over to you to talk a little bit more about cultural relevancy.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, you can see my screen now. You can see my cultural iceberg. Yes, great. All right, so this is what we call the cultural iceberg, and we know that culture is really important, right, to education and especially to STEM. So I'd like to pause for a minute and ask you, what does culture mean to you? When you think of culture, and just you can type that in the chat. What do you think about when you think of culture? Brenda says traditions, values, traditions, customs and values. Food, yes, food, rules and norms, heritage, great. And so, you know, we know that there's a certain amount of observable culture, things that we can see. And so what are some of those things that you can see? Family structure, religion, life cycle goals, clothing. Yes. What else? Holidays, yes. What are some other sort of observable, what we call surface culture? Yes, personal space. As I said, I used to do a lot of traveling, and that was something that was always interesting to me, right? When I would go to another country and folks would be talking to me, they would come right up to me. And I really had a sense of sort of the personal space that we often express in the United States. Eye contact, yes, eye contact. Great. And what are a few of the things that you can't see, that aren't observable, that are sort of below that line, that iceberg line? Attitude towards authority. Yes. And that can actually be connected to the eye contact, right? Also. Family expectations, yes. Values, yes. So here is this sort of cultural iceberg with some of these things called out, things that are observable and things that are not observable. Is there anything on here that is surprising to you, that hadn't occurred to you as you were sort of thinking about culture?
Not that it's surprising, but jumped out is definition of sin. And like that stuck in my, like, whoa, that's totally true.
Right?
And not something, because I think a lot of times it's like in behavior or etiquette and those things, but that's a really good one that struck out to me.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share that surprised them?
Importance of time. Sorry to there's definitely cultures that time is a lot more fluid and cultures where it's very finite. I was raised on military bases, so time is very finite and very exact in all programming. But then like other cultures where you're like, apparently when we said dinner at 6, they meant at 6-ish, after 7, whatever, whenever it happens.
Right, that's right. That's great. Yes, and gender differences is at the bottom. I don't know why it's next to that little fish, but that sometimes that we can observe that. Just, do you want to say a little more about that?
Oh, I was looking at learning styles. That's interesting that falls in cultural definition. And now I can imagine that. I just hadn't thought of that.
Right, right.
I think I'm the one that put in gender differences, and I was just like, oh, it's not biological, but it's deep culture, non-observable. So that makes sense.
Yes. Great, thank you. That was a good discussion. And now I think I'm turning it back to Brenda.
Yes, thank you. Our next strategy is to show how STEM is collaborative and social. So we talked a little bit in the stereotype discussion about how this is a persistent stereotype of STEM, that it's not something you do very collaboratively or socially. And so we want to emphasize that when we're working with youth, and we want to provide structured collaborative opportunities, which I'll talk about in a second. And part of this too in the research is really around not just providing collaborative opportunities and opportunities to be social, but really creating a supportive environment for girls and other youth to feel welcome and to feel safe to take risks. So it's really about creating that safe space, especially for kids who are not as familiar with STEM, who aren't as familiar with STEM tools, and are coming in feeling a little bit less of the expert in STEM. It can be really important to make sure that environment is one where they feel like they can ask questions and they can try to answer questions. And this really helps change the perceptions of STEM, but also helps youth to, again, identify with STEM, feel like it might be something for them. They could belong in STEM. Next slide, please, Karen. So one of the things we talk about a lot is group work strategies. And I'm sure you all have experience working with youth in groups and how that works. A few things about specifically working with youth who are underrepresented in STEM in groups is the importance of choosing groups intentionally. So you can let youth choose their groups sometimes, but you wouldn't want to let them choose their groups all the time. You want to be intentional about that. And really the thing that I think is really important is this assigning roles and rotating assignments. So the idea is that, and you may have seen this in your work, that kids who are less familiar or less confident with a STEM activity might kind of take a back seat, right? And they might watch, they might be the note taker. And we see that with girls and other non-traditional youth in STEM a lot. And so the idea is that you assign everybody a role for every activity, and then you rotate those roles. So for example, this list has somebody as the facilitator, which is somebody who would make sure everybody knows what you're doing and make sure everybody gets to participate. And then you have people who set up and clean up the equipment. You have an equipment person who is kind of in charge of making sure everybody gets to use the equipment and knows how to use it. And then if you have a report out, you have a reporter person. So you can kind of see that if everybody gets a chance to do all of these things, they're going to get the hands-on experience that we know is actually connected to amount of learning. And it also helps to increase your comfort level with STEM activities and STEM materials and tools, and your confidence level. So this is just an example of how providing collaborative opportunities is a great strategy, but really doing it intentionally can make a big difference. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Kata to talk about our final strategy.
Thanks so much, Brenda. So yeah, the final strategy involves role models, and role models have really been part of the conversation about engaging and supporting girls in STEM for a long time. As more research has been conducted with role models in different settings and age groups, we have learned a lot more about how we use role models and their potential impact on girls and women in STEM. And so research really shows that role models can have a positive impact on girls in STEM, but the research isn't entirely consistent. There are many factors related to the use of role models that differ in programs and in research, including age range, role model characteristics, and how role models are integrated into programming. But most research that we have reviewed and summarized here really focuses on female STEM role models and middle school and high school age girls. And so the points you see here are summarized on this slide. And so really those central points include the positive impact of role models to increase girls' interest in STEM, to increase positive attitudes towards STEM subjects, to help dispel stereotypes about who does STEM, but also stereotypes about the discipline more broadly. Research has also shown that role models can help girls have a positive identification with STEM. So girls really seeing themselves as a STEM professional or a scientist. And kind of related to this point, research has also shown it just helps girls' sense of belonging within whether it's a STEM class or a particular field. Research has also pointed to greater self-efficacy in STEM through exposure to role models, as well as positive attitudes towards science and increased appreciation for the use of STEM beyond maybe the traditional sense. So that's just a broad summary. And so we just wanted to also share some examples of how you can foster exposure and interaction with role models in your programming. And so NGCP works with the Lida Hill Philanthropies, and we've worked to launch the If Then collection. And the If Then collection is a free digital library which houses photos, videos, and other media of women in STEM fields. And part of the If Then initiative is really to inspire girls to pursue careers in STEM, but to also really shift the conversation and change how the broader population perceives women in STEM. And so the collection actually features 125 female STEM professionals. We call them If Then ambassadors. And one is pictured here. Her name is Beata Mirzva. She is a molecular biologist and an artist. So she is a cancer researcher, but she also uses her passion for understanding how cells divide to create drawings and clothing. So she really turns what she sees under the microscope into art and fashion. So really communicating science in a creative and unconventional way. And so her photos as well as videos of her sharing her interests, her career journey, that's all available on the If Then webpage. And just to kind of provide, I guess, a little bit of a deeper example of how you might engage or encourage interaction of girls and role models, we just kind of wanted to provide an example from our work. So last summer, NGCP organized a summer program for girls 13 to 16. It was called the Bright program. And really the cornerstone of that program was daily interaction with diverse STEM role models. And we were really lucky enough to have, well, we had a bunch of great role models, but we were lucky to have Beata as one of our role models. And During Bright, Beata shared her career journey with girls, really providing them with an inside look into how she creates her drawings using microscopy and then turns them into fashion designs and then clothing and or designs such as on a coffee mug and whatnot. And so during this discussion, girls had the opportunity to engage with Beata, ask her questions, while also sharing their insights on her work, as well as what they had learned throughout the week during the program. And so after girls talked with Beata, then they also had the opportunity to communicate science through art, through a hands-on activity. So they drew either physically with pen and paper or using an app like Sketchpad, their own science-inspired clothing item or whatever they chose. And then they shared that item through Flipgrid, because this program was actually all online due to COVID. So they shared through Flipgrid with the community of girls and educators. So it really gave the girls an opportunity to not only learn from a female STEM role model, but to really demonstrate their own competence on a certain STEM topic. Next slide. And we just also wanted to provide just one more example of how you might connect exposure to role models with hands-on activities that in this example, this worksheet you see here, or sorry, activity sheet can be found on the IFTHAD webpage. So on the webpage, you can access a diverse array of these activity sheets related to the work of IFTHAD ambassadors. They're called the Curiosity Camp activity sheets. And the sheets introduce girls to a certain STEM concept related to the work of a role model, and then it guides girls through a hands-on activity using materials they can find at their home, and it really encourages girls to reflect on their work as well. So in the example picture here, it's Beata's activity sheet. Girls have the opportunity to use this marbling technique with oil, water, and food coloring to recreate what you might see under the microscope. So that's just some, examples of how you can expose girls to role models and also connect hands-on activity to that learning with role models. I am going to pass it back to Brenda, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Kata.
Yeah.
And if you have a chance to look at Beata's video, it's great to show to girls and to youth too. She's super interesting and engaging. So this is just a recap of the strategies we went over, addressing STEM stereotypes, making STEM personally and culturally relevant, showing how STEM is collaborative, and incorporating diverse STEM role models. And these are 4 of the 6 strategies that are contained in the SciGirls strategies, which, if you're not familiar with them, it's a research-based guide to strategies for engaging girls in STEM. And we have the resource listed at the end of the presentation, but the guide also provides tips, additional tips for addressing these. So we were planning on having a small group discussion, but because of time, I think we'll do it as a large group, and we're a small group, so that's fine. We wanted you to think about and reflect a little bit about your own practice and the youth that you serve, and think about, based on our discussion today, thinking about some opportunities that you see to increase engagement of girls, or maybe it's also engagement of other youth that you're trying to engage in STEM, like we talked about at the beginning of the webinar. So I would love for those of you who are in programs in particular, but also those of you who are part of the network, Diana and Anna, to unmute yourselves and talk a little bit about, there are things that you think you could tweak, or if there are things that you think maybe you might start focusing on more, or anything that kind of struck you as something you could implement or use. I'd love to take a few minutes and hear your thoughts.
Wendy and I were just texting. we have a youth group building out a Think, Make, Create lab, a mobile STEM lab unit, and it's a 18 youth at a high school today doing it. And I did notice last week when I was there were 2 power sanders and the guys used them the whole time. And so I ended up going over, and I love power tools, and I was like sanding, and I was trying to just like model that a little bit. But I think Wendy said, you know, in text, she's like, we got to make sure the girls are using the power tools. But it's modeling, you know, the 2 shop teachers there are men, and our 2 builders are men. So I think it's being more intentional and going and representing our gender. I don't know.
And I like this. I like this suggestion of making it an assigned role, and it just rotates.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example. And it's really helpful once you tell them this is your role. It kind of takes the pressure off the facilitator too, I think, which is nice. That's a great example. Thanks for sharing. Other thoughts?
Yeah. I can imagine marketing a program, you know, such as like a girls' hike or a girls' nature class. But one thing that we struggle with is racial diversity. And I think something that we could improve upon. And I just can't really imagine there being a positive reaction to like a non-white girls hike. Like, and I was just wondering if you had any suggestions of how to market to those audiences. I know Idaho is obviously a very white state in general, but that's changing. And I think we want to get in contact with those populations, and I don't really know how.
That's a great question, and I'll take a stab, but I encourage Karen and Kata to jump in. I think what you said was key about connecting to those communities, and I think when we've seen efforts like that be very successful, it's when you're connecting to the community first and not just open, you know, an open call to come to a program, right? So I think if you're able to partner or even just connect with groups in the community that are more focused on the population that you're working with, that can be really helpful, and market through them. Does that make sense? But also working with them to ask them those questions, right? So what are the girls interested in? Might be some things that we could offer, and what are ways we could offer them that would be attractive to them? And you know, and then you have that personal relevancy, that cultural relevancy piece, which is a much bigger thing. But that's just, I mean, that's a start. But we'd be happy to talk more, because I think there's a lot of other ideas. Karen and Kata, did you want to jump in at all?
I think that was I was going to say partnering. You know, we have this longer story about, we had an opportunity for girls to from rural Eastern Washington, not too far away from Idaho, to go to the Boeing plant overnight. And we didn't get any programs agreeing to go. And then we realized we weren't a trusted partner, right? So we actually partnered with programs that served those girls. And they were the ones that, you know, came over to Seattle, right? And organized all of that, because parents didn't know who we were, right? And we weren't even that involved once we found these really great community-based programs that could really lead that. So it really is partnering. And then I was just going to say, if you can find a champion or a role model, right, I think that will also make a big difference, right, in the effectiveness, the impact of partnering with another organization. But I really appreciate that question, because, right, you can't say, you know, this activity is for non-white girls. You can't, I mean, we can't put that out there, right? And so it really is working with an organization that has an approach and is connected.
I thought, Alex, that question brought up something to me, and thinking about the network has a partnership directory. And I just, in this conversation, I'm like, I know the president of Mujeres Unidas de Idaho, you know, and so like, why haven't I reached out to get them as a partner? I know they would be. My friend's sister's an engineer, and I know she's would be very excited to be part of the network and partner with so we could do a better job of thinking about which partnerships to invite to be part of the network too.
That's perfect. I'm glad that that sparked that, because I know that's often what we do is if we want to help a certain population or distribute resources, we think, okay, who can we partner with, right? Because coming from us is not necessarily, again, we're not necessarily a trusted partner for that community. So we find the partner that is. That's great.
I have one other question, and this just comes from, I have 2 teenagers, and I know gender fluidity is very much part of the culture of young people now. And how do we be inclusive of that in I don't know, in our marketing, in our language? I'm struggling to even ask the question.
So I think, Brenda, I think you want to take that one first, and then I can say a little bit.
Sure. I think what we've started to really try to do is be careful of our language, right? And we work with an organization who started to use, I think their term is gender expansive youth. I mean, I think you can use different terminology, but we've really tried to, girls, anybody who identifies as a girl, we use they and them a lot instead of the more gendered pronouns. But I think when you have that in marketing, or when you use it to describe what a program is, to just be clear that it's not just about, we're not defining what girl or woman is for you. It's really, if you identify, I think is a key way to relay it. But I think it's something we're all still working on, and and really trying to focus on how to make sure we're being as inclusive as possible. Karen, did you want to add anything? We're just about out of time.
I know. And I'll send you a resource. There's this really great, I think it's called the Progressives Style Guide. I don't think it means progressive in the political sense, around marketing in a gender fluid way. So I'll send that to you, because I found that super helpful for me, and I'll send that on to you. And Brenda, I think you want to say something quickly about the slide, and then I will wrap up.
Sure. So just quickly, this is the framework. There's a lot in it that we created for the Million Girls Moonshot. We have the resource listed on the next, on our resource slide. If you want to go look at it more deeply, there are a lot of resources connected to it. So you can take a look, and we're happy to. It's just kind of a way for after school programs to start thinking about equity inclusion, and to pick out maybe specific areas that you want to work on. It's not meant to do all at once. So if you want to check it out and let us know if you have any questions or want us to talk with you about it, we'd be happy to.
And there are also recorded webinars that we did for Million Girl Moonshot that are listed on that website that you could just watch about the framework. We did a webinar for each large concept area of the framework. And then we just want to wrap up with some future opportunities, some webinars that we're doing for Million Girls Moonshot around using STEM role models, March 23rd, next week. And Tech Bridge Girls has Role Models 101 around really incorporating role models into your programs. And then at the end of April, we're really excited about this webinar where we're going to spotlight programs that are using role models. I think that'll be really helpful. And that's it. Thank you so much. This has been a great opportunity. It's been great to see and meet all of you. And you follow up at any point if there's more information that we can provide.
Yeah, thank you for your participation. It was really fun, and it was great to hear about your work and how this might be relevant for you. So thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate the talk. I'll make sure that those opportunities for training get on our training calendar in case anyone forgets, and I will be emailing a follow-up to our participants, and I'll remind you guys there.